Hello, Nintendo fans. My name is Mario Master. How are we doing today? So, am I wearing my shirt backwards? I swear if I am, I'm sorry. The shirt really doesn't have a front or back, but whatever. So, we're going to be talking about what I consider to be the perfect trilogy of movies and how to do a trilogy right, because they are not making any more movies. Although they did make a lot of shoot off series and everything like that, and they weren't good. But today we are going to be talking about How to Train Your Dragon and how it is the perfect trilogy. Now, the first movie was awesome, coming out in 2010, 13 years ago. Now, I do not know when the other ones came out, but here are the dates for both of them. Now, both of these movies, all three, are what I consider to be the perfect trilogy. And the third one, if you haven't seen it, there are going to be spoilers for all three of these movies. Now, for the first one, there is a villain, I guess you could say, but it's mostly about a son, or rather a father, getting to, accept his son being different, which is done beautifully. And Hiccup, the main character, changes an entire era, and it's done tastefully. Now, in the second movie, there is a villain, an actual villain, that does die, we think. But how it's dealt with is done beautifully. There's new dragons that get introduced. Hiccup's dad fucking dies. But Hiccup's mom gets introduced. Done beautifully. So we have a new dragon gets introduced, which is bigger and even more goated than the previous big dragon in the other movie. So that's awesome. And other new dragons have been introduced than just the ones that we know of. Because one thing that the first movie did do, they introduced 5 dragons. Let's see. Deadly Natter, Gronkle, Zippleback, the one that catches on fire, and then Night Fury. So it introduces five main ones, right? Well, here's what they do. In the scene where they open the cave of the first movie, they use 4 assets. The 4 being all of them except for the Night Fury. And that will be explained in the third movie, which I will get to. Now, the first one doesn't really explain a lot of the lore. It's just dragons exist. Actually, none of the movies really explore the real lore about how and why the dragons are there. They just showed up. You know what I mean? But it's very nice to see, So you have the second one, which once again has a king dragon, which is fucking humongous and even bigger than a queen, and instead of shooting fire out of its mouth, it can shoot ice, which is actually a really cool idea and is one of very few that can swim. Dragons that can swim. But then you get to the second one, like once again they introduce so many new dragons. And sadly, the series, which I'm not saying that the series is bad, it's just not as good as the movies, which they're not. They really are bad. Um, and I wish I could say I have watched them, but I haven't. Because I know they're bad just by looking at them. Because, as I think we all know, every animated series that comes off of a movie usually looks pretty bad. Like, the animation quality goes down, I don't even think it's the same voice actors. It might not be, but it's not as good. So that's why you want to really stick to the movies, because the movies have their own timeline and their own lore. So me saying that the backstory of dragons isn't really explained might not be true, because it might be explained in the series, but I wouldn't know because I don't watch them. Anyway, you move on to the third one, where there is no bigger, better dragon. But there are new dragons, and a new dragon gets introduced called a Light Fury. And a female version of a Night Fury. Awesome, that's really cool. It can turn invisible somehow. That makes a lot of sense, because it's explained in the first movie that no one's ever seen a Night Fury, which means they could always turn invisible. It's so mind-blowing, And it's also noted that Night Furies never miss. I don't think Toothless ever misses a shot, ever, or ever misses catching someone. Even the Light Fury catches Hiccup before he falls in the water. Fucking mind-blowing. So instead of having a bigger dragon, you have a bigger bad, which means there's what would happen if Hiccup killed what if Hiccup killed Toothless? Because this guy, I cannot remember his name, he kind of took over after Drago died, but he was just operating on his own a little bit. But Drago is mentioned a lot, and so he kind of he's killing all the dragons. He doesn't want dragons to exist, right? So he dies, obviously, but and Hiccup comes to the realization, because this guy threatened, because he was so good at what he did, he threatened the entirety of dragon existence as a whole. So Hiccup realizes at the end of the third movie that they are not worthy of dragons. Which you come to that oh fuck, they're not going to do this. They're not going to do this. And you have the heartbreaking scene of Hiccup letting Toothless go. Letting him be a dragon without a rider. Without someone controlling where he goes. It's a lot like watching your kid go to school for the first time, because as a parent that you have lost a lot of control of what happens to your kid. So it's very much like that. And Toothless and Hiccup don't interact until 10 years later, maybe more, where Hiccup has the real fucking Viking beard going on. and they actually meet up, and Toothless remembers Hiccup, and it's awesome. It's done beautifully. Um, and it all ends on a high note where we know that obviously dragons don't exist, but you know what's introduced that I really didn't mention is the Lost World, which is introduced in the third movie, and it introduces this entire new place. See, what the movies do is so genius, and it makes sense, right? You have new dragon. You get introduced to dragons in the first movie, a place and a big bad dragon, right? The place being the dragon's nest, which, as we will discover, is not the dragon nest. But, it's a dragon nest controlled by a big bad, which is the queen. You have the second movie, which gets new places, not just a place, new places, where you have a bunch of things that Hiccup has discovered, and then he gets introduced to his mom, and his mom knows a bunch of shit and knows dragon secrets, and you get introduced to new dragons and new places and everything like that. You get to the last movie, and you get introduced to new dragons, a villain, and a new place where the movie will end, and that's the dragon nest. See, it's considered to be the center of the world, but I think it's just called the hidden world, whatever you want to call it, or the true dragon nest, where every dragon lives, and Toothless becomes the alpha in between one at the end of 2. He also becomes Thor for some fucking reason, but we don't talk about that, and how OP Toothless is now. But anyway, these movies line up perfectly. They have a direct timeline, and they aren't that far apart. I think like maybe only 3 to 5 years. Now, I watched the first one, I think, in theaters, maybe. I don't think I watched the second one in theaters. I know for a fact that I watched the third one in theaters because that one was hyped to shit. I'm sure if you went back into whenever that movie was made, you will find probably a good amount of hype behind the How to Train Your Dragon fans. And I want to go see that movie as much as the next person, let me tell you. I want to go see that movie because I sure as hell, I was really young. I'm assuming, I don't remember when this movie came out. But I put the date at the beginning, so I'll put my age up here, I guess. I'm assuming I was young. But, I fucking cried because I grew up with these movies. Only 2010. The first one was made in 2010. I was born in 2004, which would put me for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Roughly at 6. So I grew up with these movies, really. And a bunch of other kids did. When the second one was introduced, McDonald's actually ran. No, I don't think it was McDonald's. There was a company that ran a card game, and I wish I still had them because I probably could make a pretty buck off of them. They sold some cards, some trading cards, and I actually had Toothless as a card in the Whispering Death. I do not remember what this card game was called. You could probably find it, but this game does not exist anymore. I bet you couldn't even find the cards. Well, maybe you could, but I bet they're worth like a pretty fucking penny now, and I should have kept them. But anywho, How to Train Your Dragon is how is what I would call, once again, the perfect trilogy. And nothing will beat How to Train Your Dragon as a trilogy. Now, I do know that there are better trilogies out there, maybe. But these series of movies is how a trilogy is done. And how a trilogy should be done. And it's done beautifully. Now, go watch the movies. Because I bet you it has been a long time. But anywho, that's it. Thank you, everybody, so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Only a small percentage of you are. So, please. We're trying to get to 400 before I graduate, so. And also, don't forget to check out my Twitter, Discord, and Patreon. I'm officially cutting Cash App out of the equation. So, it is officially going to be Twitter, Discord, and Patreon. Cool. That's it. Peace out.